Welcome.
Hi.
I believe you're trying to fill the shoes of Amy.
Well, big shoes to fill. But yes, I'm gonna miss my friend Amy, by the way, not to
Still
make her
around. I mean,
feel,
for a bit, but we're handing off. It's gonna be good.
yeah, I still
We're all
got
gonna
you
miss
on
you.
Signal. I'll be like,
It's
yo,
all good. Uh, Brandon, are we doing that normal thing where we have no agenda and then we talk for an hour?
I put a few things on there in case people show up, but
Okay.
yeah, pretty much.
Okay, good, good. Jory, this is exactly how this rolls. There will be zero agenda items until about 5 seconds before the meeting happens. We will have nothing to talk about, but we will somehow go on for an hour. It is wonderful.
yes, I'm familiar with this strategy.
Brandon, if I've miscategorized anything about how we like OC, right, exactly. It's all very friendly. Yeah.
Somebody said once, and it's like meetings will expand to or fill the allotted time. So,
It's like a
if this were,
gas.
yeah, exactly. So, yeah, we'd do that. And
Actually, Brandon, if you don't mind, can you catch us up? Where are things currently as far as current status? Because I've been out for a couple of weeks and I've not been following as much.
Yeah. With the releases on image and distribution spec, that kind of took a lot of the pressure off from us.
Good.
We've been looking a little bit do we want to revamp some of the tag listing APIs and things like that? And so making like a V2 of those APIs for requests people keep having. And otherwise, we've got a few maintainers that dropped recently. And so I think we're looking at maybe having some discussions to sort out, do we want to get some new names on that list?
Yeah, it has been a while since we've done a maintainers refresh. Yeah, I want to say the last one was probably 2019, 2020.
It's been a bit. It was probably when they brought myself and Sajay and a few others
Okay.
on. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's been a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, plenty of things to do, Jory, basically. Oh, good. We do have
Wow.
folks joining, so neat, neat, neat.
And maintainer folks no less. That's a good sign.
This is quite good. Yes, 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 yes.
I felt called out by your first agenda item, but I clicked the link and I've already approved it. That one's
Yeah,
not on me.
I feel bad putting some of these on the list because I'm like, I put them on. Tinon's going to show up. He's already answered it. I don't have another maintainer to pick on. So there are a few sitting out there for way too long. I just kind of throw a couple of easy ones on there if we can get some people look at them up here. Some of these are easy approves.
I'm gonna go on face mute real quick to eat my salad while we, yeah, just so you know, that's what I'm doing.
We'll be sure to call on you right when you get the full bite in your mouth.
If you could do that while I'm eating some lettuce, that would be great.
That is our normal process around here. At least that's what they always do to me. Derek, while we're getting things started over here, question for yourself and maybe Sajay and probably even Tiana as well. We've had a few maintainers drop recently. What are the thoughts on of maybe opening up some new maintainer votes? Should we get some side discussions going outside of this, but just kind of doing a quick temperature check?
Or which project specifically?
I think both image and distribution spec have lost a few maintainers lately.
I feel fine with where distribution spec is. I know image spec is a little trickier because there's a lot less active folks there. But yeah, I don't we had this discussion a few years ago. And I think at least my position then was, yeah, distribution spec is in a little bit more active state than image spec. At least folks will respond there. I'm sad that Vincent left though. He's not that inactive even.
So looking at participants, Brandon, I think Sajay is your mark for that first agenda item.
And it's the second time this week I've seen Sajay in a meeting. I wasn't expecting to see you yesterday, but the entire Microsoft company apparently decided to show up for one meeting. Maybe I'm slightly over exaggerating, but you definitely showed up in force.
I think the people who presented in yesterday's meeting were kind of doing it for the first time, so just wanted to cheer them on. That was the idea.
So yeah, I think the one you're being called out on, Sajay, is, are we talking image spec, the Go version?
Yeah,
I figure that's just an easy approve if we have
Yep.
another maintainer over here that wants to hit check on that one.
Yeah, I made it sound dramatic. It's really a pretty easy review.
That does kind of go to one of my concerns. So I feel like we've got a lot of stuff that's been sitting out in the issue queue and the PR queue for a long while. It just hasn't been getting attention. I don't know if that's just things happen and then people ignore it after the fact, or if do we need to be paying maintainers to try to get attention on them, or is that a sign that we might need some more active people in here?
How you all have like historically, or if you have historically like done any kind of maintainer cultivation type process, to help, be ready for that handoff versus just calling for maintainers. Just this is more for my edification, so I understand historically what you do.
Yeah. I think historically, probably Derek would be the best person to give you the history there. I feel like we get to a point where we're not getting PRs merged, and then we say, okay, maybe we need some more maintainers here, or we feel like we're short in some areas. But Derek, why don't you go ahead and give more historic context there?
I mean, from my perspective, like, I know not everyone shares this perspective, but like we have specs come in. A lot of the work that goes on to specs is like very front loaded. And then we get an initial version out, and then the specs themselves don't change that much. We
Right.
can bring new specs in, which would bring new maintainers into OCI in general, but the specs themselves don't change that much. So maintainers just float away. The problem is those maintainers are still the ones that normally have the best context of those changes, even though they're not very active. Like when changes do come in, sometimes we do need like the perspective that maybe from 5 years ago, but it's still like why is stuff done this way? So
Yeah.
it's hard to go in and be like, hey, like let's rotate all the maintainers out with like a fresh crew. And it's like, well, these are specs. They're not like the same as like live projects that are like
Right.
actively changing all the time. So it's hard to replace maintainers and keep projects the same as they were. At least that's kind of my perspective. So there's been a few cases where like I think with image spec, there's a lot of changes that there was been a lot of changes that wanted to go into image spec, but there wasn't active maintainers to actually approve them. Now the question was like, do we put them into image spec or do we put them into a new spec? My perspective is like, I really wish we would have had a new artifact spec and put a lot of stuff in there. Like instead of trying to put the artifact manifest in there, we could have we could have made a new spec, had a new set of maintainers that are like, have the full context of what are we trying to do right now, and then like release something for that rather than like, hey, let's try to build up a new set, and then like the old maintainers might come in and be like, hey, like that's not what we're trying to do here. But I don't know. There's always a little bit of like drama, I feel like, in OCI because of that, but it's fun too.
Well, that's why I'm into standards, is for the drama personally. So,
Yeah,
But
it's
that
not a
makes a
good
lot of
standard
sense.
if there's no drama.
right.
And if there's no drama, nobody cares. So
The impression I got when we decided to make it all one spec was that image spec was becoming the place where all the data types, the media types for in JSON format were going to be stored, and distribution spec was going to be where a bunch of the API definitions were going to be tracked, and they kind of paired it that way rather than making it specific for this is just for images. But I think there has been a lot of drama back and forth on that.
Yeah, I
There was
think it's
also
like when we
a time-
introduce new types, especially, it's like, hey, this is a new type. Is it a new spec? Is it a new thing? Is it a new functionality? And it's hard to like, yeah, I don't think we solved that problem yet because of where we're at. But that being said, it's like there's this notion of like, hey, we have these specs that are like popular, like, so it's like there's a notion, it's like, well, why don't we get something in there, then people will have to use them. But it's like, well, if it's new functionality, like put it in a new spec. But it's like people want their new spec or they want their new functionality in the old spec, so that it kind of like forces users of that existing spec to use the new functionality. Or at least that's, I don't say what some of the drama is, but like where some of the like back and forth is, like how much of that should we do? So obviously, like, yeah, getting like changing the maintainers out is a good way to like get new features in. But that's not always what the maintainers there want to do.
And how do you do new features? Do you do it with, extensions and experiments? That's one way. Another way is, build it all out and force it, down the pipe. OCI had a different plan, different strategy, and really the reason distribution didn't exist right away is because we were busy doing the other stuff, right? And distribution API wasn't really finished, and in Docker too, it was fairly new. So we didn't really want to bring it in yet, and then Docker said, "Hey, let's do that too." But that was a few years after we started the specs. So the timing really was the reason why I think things were split up the way they were split up. And the mission for OCI was more to stop the forking from happening and to get everybody to come together, right? On an already established, if you will, Docker, model for how to do images and the runtime and the other specs. It was just the way it was right at the time. And there were alternative specs coming out, forks, and mods, that were going to create a situation where customers could not run a container across other clouds and other implementations of runtime. Really, that was what OCI was about. And now it seems to be changing a little bit since we finished that mission to add new extensions. And how do we do that? And we're doing, the plan is with work groups, look at new areas. And Jordy, that might be a place where you can, apply. And certainly in the work groups, I think that's where we should be pulling new maintainers, because people have done a lot of focus work in the specs to modify them, and they will be needed to garnish approval with the existing maintainers that know the history, as Derek was talking about.
This is super helpful. Thank you. So I'm really appreciative of this kind of history, and this makes a lot of sense. I'm be happy to kind of put some thought to kind of what's OCI, the next generation, Star Trek there.
TNG. The funny thing, TNG is old as well. So, yeah. What is old is new again. There you go.
When I think about how we extend the spec and add new options into it, we've worked in the distribution spec to say, here's how individual groups can do their extensions and develop on the side. So we've got a path over there. We've also got a path over there if we change the spec itself with things like the accept header on a request, where a client can say, hey, I know about this new thing. Can you give it to me in the new way versus the old way? So we've got ways that clients can be interactive with the registry and get that new functionality if the registry is updated as well. And then with the actual image spec, we've always defined inside the spec that new fields could always be added going forward. We wouldn't change an existing field and redefine its current behavior, but we could always add a new field, and that gave us that forward progress. And so knowing that we've got a few of these outlets here that we could have new functionality added and new features added, it always makes you wonder, going back to an old question that's been asked before of, is the spec dead? Are we going to say, hey, we made a release, we made a 1.0, that's it, it's done. We're never going to change that again. If you want to do something else, you got to make a new spec. And I think we've bounced around that question in the past, and we didn't go down that path, but that is one that has come up before.
And that also leads to the ongoing question: can we break anything in the old implementations? I think we're still going with the no breaking changes, please. Right, only extensions. Right, as long as we stick to that, then there's not going to be any arguments or fights about forking or anything like that. It's when you want a breaking change that the drama goes up.
And then we try to fix tag pagination. That's just a chaos grenade I'm going to throw in the room right there.
No, it's fair. If something's not defined correctly, it's going to be implemented different ways. Namespaces, what's a repository, right? I mean, there's these kinds of questions were initially defined as not being answered in the specifications on purpose, because the OCI mission wasn't to pick a winner outside of the limited scope elements of what we pulled in from Docker, right? We didn't want to pick a winner. We wanted to let the industry decide. But now that we're leading a little bit on the ideas, like around artifacts, that's creating a new thing, and without extension points and making them experimental to begin with, drama went up a little bit.
Rory's got a good question in chat, and I'll let her come ask it.
Oh, well, I mean, I always ask questions out loud or in chat. A lot of working groups will develop like a design principles document to sort of help focus some of the, decisions around how to add new features and whether we permit breaking changes and stuff like that. And or they'll develop something that is like a priority of constituencies, like our spec first serves this end user and then it serves this is sort of the order of concerns that we serve. Do you all have anything like that? Do you all want anything like that? Has that ever been, do you think that's helpful? No is also fine.
I would say our
I'm
mission
gonna say-
statement's insufficient to solve that.
I mean, it might be a useful exercise if you are thinking about, are we done at 1.0 and now what we're doing after this is just things on top of that. It could be, I'm just throwing ideas out for you to consider, not making any recommendations at this point.
Yeah, I tend to agree. A lot of it is, no, we don't have that. We have bits and pieces scattered all over the place.
Well,
No is fine.
I think we did have that initially, but we've kind of moved beyond that. Brandon, is that a better characterization? And now we need to be able to pull things back together. We're in a great spot to be able to kind of rework things.
People with more historical context know better than I would on that.
Well, I was trying to see where is the scope defined? Like, yeah, I don't know if everything is in the charter. Like,
It got moved around a couple times, Derek, and then deleted the last time I checked.
Yeah, we used to have a scope table, but we don't have that anymore.
Yes, it got deleted.
and I know like the charter is like kind of a very high barrier for adding stuff to, because it's like we propose something and then like the Linux Foundation legal like makes it able to be put in there and then put in there. So it's not like, I don't know, we have a good place to put that type of stuff.
The way I think about it is the charter is basically the constitution of the OCI, right? Like it's a very high barrier to change. We should probably have something that's lower barrier for us to change to, that we can do as more like rules or something like that.
That's why I like something that's like a principles document. Principles can be refined over time. They can be sort of, reprioritized if you need to, because, the technology changes or your core participants change. But it's also something that hopefully is publicly consumable and helps to signal to adopters or to signal to new maintainers like, oh shit, this is really something I want to be involved in because these principles resonate. So just a thought. New girl coming in with a whole bunch of thoughts. Sorry.
Yes, we had those, Jory, and we still exist in historical, because it's all in GitHub.
Yeah.
But yeah, it got a little bit looser after 1.0 was finally published and well established. It took a little bit of time for that well established part to happen, but we're there, right? But yeah, if we're at 2.0, we could probably reset that. It would make a lot of sense. Derek, was there a discussion about 2.0?
I mean, I think my comment was like, if we wanted to do like a distribution 2.0 or an image spec 2.0, it's like at that point, it would make sense to kind of have a different set of maintainers for the 2.0 branch. Because, I mean, really, it's at that point, it's something new. I'm not proposing that we do that we have a 2.0. I mean, I think a 2.0 and a new spec should almost be considered kind of the same thing. They should go through the same working group process and stuff. But like, it shouldn't be contingent on the existing maintainers approving of it. Like you should be able to go to the working group, which you can establish directly through the TOB. It's just more saying, it's just like, yeah, we had like a 1.0 of specs, then we have a set of maintainers who created that. But like, I wouldn't say the specs are dead, but like an individual release is scoped and we have pretty strict like backwards compatibility requirements and stuff that make it so that, yeah, we kind of want the set of maintainers who made it to continue to be somewhat involved in those decisions. But I do think that, yeah, as OCI grows, like I think working groups and either 2.0s or new specs, I think makes the most sense to me, at least what I want to see. Nobody has to ask me to maintain those.
Are you suggesting that a 2.0 should have a completely new set of maintainers too?
Yeah, I think so. I think if you had a 2.0 spec, it would go through the working group process, and the maintainers would be essentially voted on when we approve a working group. Like that was, I think that's the process we defined for working groups. And from a perspective, I mean, maybe this is just working with Go modules too much recently, but it's like a major change is like something completely new. It's like a new set of things for a clean slate.
So my biggest fear with working groups right now is that they are not very well attended. If you look at the working group on auth, I haven't been able to make the last few meetings and nobody else has.
Don't schedule them at the same time SIGNode is running.
There was a doodle poll way back.
I know.
Well, I think the other thing too is that working groups don't have to succeed. They can just figure something out and be done. But like the whole point of OCI is like, this is a place where, this is basically the place where there is a little bit of contention solved. Like it's almost intended to be the place where drama would happen, because it's where, I mean, it was built out of drama. It was like, hey, we have these competing specs. Like, how do we make sure we don't fracture the industry? And, you come here and then you figure out how do you work together and do it. But if like nobody wants to actually work on it, then that's fine. It doesn't have to like, if nobody's having a problem with it, then it's fine.
I-
But if
think
it's just
people
like people
do-
don't know about it, then that's a different thing.
I think people do think there's a problem. They're just hoping someone else will solve it in a way that they like it. And they're just going to let that happen. And when it shows up to the merge into the main spec, that's when they finally pay attention to it.
Yeah, that's what always that's what scares me though.
But that's what is most likely happening in the auth working group. In conformance right now, I think I'm the only maintainer in that spec maintainer in that group right now. Everyone else is loosely affiliated with OCI. They kind of come and go, or they're here for just that. And the biggest concern on that is that we are very much what's happening over there has a lot of overlap with a lot of other places. Has a lot of overlap with runtime. It has a lot of overlap with image, but it also has overlap with what's going on in the Kubernetes, where they're working on some of their own specs that does exactly the same stuff. And so if all of us are trying to solve the same problems and we're not talking to each other, I'm not excited for where that ends up.
Wait, which working group were you talking about that last time?
The image compatibility.
Oh, the compatibility one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, and there is a Kubernetes group. I was just watching their video the other day. What's the acronym for it? DRA.
Which one? DRA now has 4 working groups.
There we go. And image compatibility is not talking to any of them. So the fact that we're kind of doing our own thing on our side, they're doing their thing on their side, we're each trying to solve the same problem, but we're going about different directions. That doesn't feel like a good place for us to be in to me.
I mean, I guess I don't see it as that much of a problem that the working group is fairly inactive while there's a bunch of other. I mean, the whole point is that like OCI comes in once there's like the innovations kind of settled a little bit, or there's like debate between the different working groups and different approaches, and they wanted to settle on one. But like,
so image compatibility is very active, but it's not by normal OCI maintainers.
I probably want to just check, like maybe echo what Derek is saying. If image compatibility wants to kind of roll back into an existing spec, then that's a choice, right? And that's probably not a one that's an impact. But if its own set of things, then it's almost like a 2.0 with their own set of maintainers. Might be okay. But do you have a concern that they would kind of like want to roll back into image spec? Is that what's happening?
It depends on which way we go in that group. And it depends on whose problems we're trying to solve. If we're trying to solve the scheduler problem, someone running a Kubernetes scheduler across a large cluster, the approach that's being looked at is to design a new artifact, and that would come out as its own spec, however they're going to define it.
Are
That's
we
in a
going
weird
to
place right
define
now because
pods in
there's
OCI?
what's that?
Are you talking about pods?
Well, they're talking about making a spec for image compatibility to say that this image can run on this hardware.
Okay.
And so you need to know about what hardware is on each machine to
That's-
be able to know what can run
At
where.
Kubernetes level, that requires pods. Yeah.
You're in that area, but there's also what's the node something or other?
No
There's a node
resource.
spec of, yeah, I think it's node
Just
resource
CRDs
spec.
and
There is another spec over there that we've been talking to or looking at as like use that as the node resource definition, I think. So the approach that one group has been looking at is to say, let's make an artifact that is an OCI artifact that the contents are all the node resource definition. It's like,
right.
well, now we just span 2 different groups in the same artifact.
In certain resource definitions, Kubernetes owns the definition of, and then there's custom resource definitions, the CRDs. And they get involved with, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
And we have the CDI API, which arguably could be in OCI as well. it would be interesting, I think, in the 2.0 spec timeframe if we were to cover pods.
Yeah, that was talked about at was that Europe? At that camp at?
It was, yeah.
Yeah, so that would be another good direction to go in as well. Going back to the image compatibility, the other thing outside of scheduler, there's also the runtime image selection. If you're on a node, your container D, you pull up a multi-platform image and you're looking at a whole bunch of different platforms in there. Which one do you pick? There is the question, should we be able to have multiple variants of AMD 64
Yes.
that might be optimized for different hardwares on the machine? That might have an NVIDIA GPU loaded on the machine. It might have a different instruction set available because they upgrade that CPU fairly often. So that is another challenge being looked at. And if we did with that, the suggestion is that that should be part of the platform that goes in the index. So that you can,
The fields are already there in platform. It's just not a part of the API and we are upgrading that. Cortana's been doing some work right there on that. And we're reviewing some code changes across the stack.
Oh yeah.
I
mean, that's kind of another whole thing is that, you know, in Containerd, we have our own definition of what a platform string is, but it's not something that's like standardized. Although technically we're not trying to leak that out, but you know, obviously it ends up in UI and visible to users. So but yeah, I would like, I mean, maybe that's a thing because I saw some stuff and I was really surprised. I was like, whoa, I was expecting the second thing you were saying, Brandon, to come out of there. And then some of the first stuff with like artifacts and stuff. It's like, wow, that's a way different scope than I was expecting.
And so that kind of goes back to my concern that the working groups are going off with a very small subset of people going off in one direction, and we're not communicating to other people in the ecosystem and other maintainers of the specs that we've got. And I worry that that model is not as effective as we would like it to be.
Well, maybe that goes back to what Jory was asking for in the first place, which is the set of principles or like scopes. So like, not saying that we can't expand it, but expand it more slowly, like expanding it to anything that like Kubernetes defines around scheduling or pods is, to me, a huge jump in like scope for OCI. And it's like, I don't even know if that's something we'd want to take on or Kubernetes would want us to take on.
And yet the major elements of a pod, right, the containers are. So yeah,
but right now it's kind of like a one-way relationship. They depend on the stuff we do, but we don't want to depend on anything they define.
We're stuck in the middle in Containerd on that. Right? We've got Kubernetes specifications, CNCF specifications that are being developed, and you know, we're trying to implement the CRY API, and we have the runtime integration. Yeah,
I mean, that's what Containerd is. It's a middleware software that, you know, looks up and down. But if we had to like look up to, we had stuff coming in from OCI from like a bunch of different directions. Like CRI now has like a mix of OCI stuff and like Cube stuff. Yeah, that seems like it'd get even messier.
So coming back to some of the questions over in chat, Jory had asked about like some of like the implementations in here. Just, again, trying to be able to pull stuff together. Jory, back to you. Basically, like I'll have you come off of mute. Like,
no, I mean this is all expanding my understanding of. I'm not a CNCF. I'm not a DevOps developer or anything like that.
We
This
could
is
make
not
you
my-
one.
No,
Don't worry.
no,
Every time.
I'm-
You're busy. You're busy. You
Yeah.
got other things to do.
Yeah.
You're busy.
So just kind of helping to y'all are helping build the map for me in my mind about how your specs have been impacting the ecosystem so far and kind of where you sit. So this is just super helpful. I'm sure it's probably rudimentary for you, but to explain to me, but I appreciate it.
I think part of the questions that you're asking is also like, who else is implementing this? Yeah, Sam, my answer was like, well, kind of Docker, but like what other pieces in here should we know about as far as like how broadly this is? And Mike, you're off mute, so I'll pass to you. Or Brendan, up to you. Up to you.
All,
I was just going to
every
say,
cloud,
watching,
every container runtime, it's all about containers. And this specification is the common specifications that they all implement. Between Containerd and Cryo and runc, crun, and Yumoki, a whole bunch of other runtime engines and some libraries, and Linux and Windows implementations, right? If you're running an application these days, you're running it in a container.
Right. And so I guess what I was maybe hearing, and you can correct me if I am misunderstanding, like, you know, some of the major open source projects like Kubernetes have not only, you know, built implementations of OCI specs, but also they're sort of going a little further, and there's some concern around things sort of diverging from commonality. The question is has that convergence become, you know, a problem / do we have enough shared you know, agreement around how to solve a problem that we should bake it back into the spec?
Like Kubernetes, the way Derek described it was 100% correct, right? OCI's set of standards and specifications that all of the container runtime engines implement, right? The way that's the way we build contain and run containers. Kubernetes, on the other hand, uses those container runtime engines. Okay, it doesn't really know what OCI is. It just knows it wants to run containers, and it gives those operational instructions to the container runtime on the node to create clusters. Okay, Kubernetes is a scheduling system, a common one that pretty much all the clouds are using now. They don't have to. Some use something else, HPA or some other, you know, Linux specification. Docker has their own, but it is the most popular by far and large as far as how do you schedule workloads, okay, onto a cluster. Now, the thing we're talking about here is Kubernetes has this thing called pods, and they also have resources that have to be attached to those pods. And inside the pods is at least one container, okay? Although it might be a virtual machine. So really what's going on in Kubernetes is they're scheduling to run workloads. And those workloads, you can call them applications. Sometimes they're isolated in a container. Sometimes they're isolated in a container in a virtual machine. Sometimes they're a group of containers called a pod that have shared resources that they, you know, each container in that pod has access to for modification and reading. Okay. And Kubernetes has an application style, if you will, and it does this clustering and workload management and a lot more stuff. I'm oversimplifying, right? But it is the container runtime's major client because almost all of the clouds are using it. And then there's a thing called kubelet, runs on the node, and it integrates with the container runtimes over this thing we call the CRI API. The container runtimes implement the CRI APIs as a daemon on the server on the Linux machine or Windows or whatnot, right? And then to run these pods and those containers and attach those resources, networks, and all that kind of stuff. Okay, does that help? So it's all intertwined, and we all know each other, and we're all good friends, pretty much.
from the other direction, I was surprised watching the KubeCon EU talks this year, just how many projects have jumped on the OCI artifact specs and how they can package together stuff that's not a container image and push it up to a registry and share it, usually with themselves, just using it as a data store wherever they need to put the data. And so we're seeing it from groups like the Argo. We'd already seen it from groups like Helm. We've got the signing solutions that are out there, been doing a lot of that. But now we're also seeing just everybody needs to have somewhere to put data. They're just dumping it in a container registry now. and it's going to be a very popular destination.
Yeah, I think that's cool. I still think we shouldn't abandon the artifacts manifest though, because
I got
whatever.
a promise that we're going to do Artifacts Manifest in 2.0 or 1.2. I got it written down somewhere.
Joy, for historical context, this is one of those very active discussion topics.
Yeah, but yeah, I was just going back like way history was what 2000, end of 2014 when like Rocket was announced, and they didn't just announce Rocket. It was like this was CoreOS at the time. They announced app-C, which was like basically going to be a better version of Docker images, and everybody was like, "What the heck?" And then everyone was kind of mad at them, but also kind of mad at Docker. Like why can't you two just work together and figure it out? And I think that's when I don't know what behind the scenes, but the Linux Foundation came in and played arbitrator between that, and OCI was born. And like Docker and CoreOS both jumped onto OCI pretty quickly, so I think it was pretty successful. But if you look at like where the scope of it landed, it was really like those early days of like everybody's building all these containers, and now it's like, oh, I'm going to build a container and it's not going to work here. And then there was a whole like Rockinettes thing back in the day. They were like
exactly. I
trying to
mentioned
create
Kubelet.
another.
Yeah, when I mentioned Kubelet, there were two versions at one point. There was a Kubelet for Rocket, and there was a Kubelet for Docker.
Yeah.
And there wasn't enough resource to manage both of them. And they were getting different features, different capabilities. The containers couldn't run on both. They had to be rebuilt for both. Two registry types. Oh, it was becoming a mess.
So whatever we disagree on now, I mean, it's a lot less drama than then, and I still think OCI is a huge success because it solved that.
Yep. Jordan, you have good questions.
Well, so it's just like I've clearly derailed us from what was the agenda, but I think that's
No
that's-
agenda.
Okay,
This is
yeah.
the agenda right here.
Yeah. So, but this has been, again, like really, really helpful. There's history and facts and assumptions actually that I had that it's good to have corrected and to learn. So
You're working at the Linux Foundation. Do you work with Todd Moore? Or
no, Todd, I don't report into Todd. I report into Mike Dolan.
oh, Mike.
Yeah. But I know Todd from before.
I suggest getting a meeting with him. He'll give you a different background.
Oh, I'm
from
sure.
the
Yeah.
executive perspective.
Yeah.
He worked with the Docker team and Microsoft and a few other companies, Amazon, for example, to help put the OCI together. I get a little defensive every once in a while because I don't want to see that original mission devolve back into, I don't think it can now, but I still don't want to see it devolve into the forking that was happening at that point in time. There's a lot of power in having at this layer of the system a set of really good common standards.
And I guess what I might be wondering or observing is like, is sort of, should we consider like coming up with something to help set out into the world, here's what we're going to go do next in order to prevent that fragmentation or forking, because people may not be aware of what OCI is doing behind the scenes for some of this.
In order to do that, as Brandon and Derek are trying, and Samuel Tiernan are trying to tell you, if we're going to do that, then we've got to get a lot of volunteers to say, okay, we're going to put a lot of time into this, right? To focus on making this the area of focus for all these new things that we want to do. as opposed to working on all the things that are taking advantage of what's already there, right? What's missing? What else do we need?
Like, I guess the big difference is like OCI today is not solving disagreements, it's trying to prevent them. Whereas, originally it was like, hey, there's all this contention and OCI is going to solve it. And now it's like, we're kind of changed to, okay, now we're trying to be proactively solve things that there's not necessarily disagreement around. But like, they're just taking what people want, and then trying to standardize them, which is kind of like, I don't know if it's a different mission, but I think it definitely like has worked out a little differently, at least in terms of like what that looks like in terms of how we bring stuff in, and what the day-to-day topics are.
Yep. Yeah, lots of interesting topics that we could expand on, like attestation, namespaces, what kind of APIs should repos have, that kind of stuff. Lots of interesting areas we could go into.
Yeah, the disagreements we have today, it's like, okay, I'll put like me and Brandon will disagree about something, but it'll be on like something so specific, like what are the header names for this, or like what does the response for this look like? It's not like so fundamental of like, completely different formats that are gonna like completely like fragment the ecosystem. So I mean, it's kind of good that those are problems from my perspective. Brandon, your mic's not working.
No, I'm trying to be nice and not like throw out the what is a DAG conversation.
I said attestation. I thought they covered it.
We've also been back and forth on the tag pagination discussion a whole bunch, which is trying to fix something where the spec was very specific on how it should work, and the only way to fix it to make it look like what registries are actually doing is to break the spec. And so that's one of those scenarios where we're in a not so fun place. Which that PR is out there. We have maintainers who might want to review that.
There was a miss. At least one, quite a few actually, but yeah. If we say DAG 3 times, John will show up. That's funny.
And Amy, I'm not worried about any of the stuff I threw on the actual agenda items there. If this is all we're talking about today, this is great. So Jory, don't feel bad about monopolizing our time. This is very productive.
Well, so I was just gonna like pop in and say hi and then like probably go eat my salad and like do some other stuff. But this is actually way more interesting than there's something else that I'm supposed to be doing right now, and I would much rather be doing this. So this is great.
So what I like about this is this gives you a kind of a historical context of like where we've been. And like one of the pieces around this group is like we tend to be able to meet up at KubeCons. Well, the next one kind of isn't until November, so we've got a lot of space in here. Unless like the wishes to be able to meet elsewhere. Question to the group. KubeCon is okay.
That's a very good point. Another reason we haven't gone very fast in the last few years is because we don't get together anymore with the express purpose of doing one of these extensions, right? Where in the past we did. We would sit down for a week at the Amazon offices or the Docker offices and just hash it out, right? And that gets more people to come, and it did work. Right now we're doing everything on Zoom, and that also works, but you don't get the commitment that you do when you have travel.
And having, mixing in sort of like in-person plenary with the virtual does tend to work better for spec projects. I don't know why that is, but it's true.
Whiteboards. And when people are smiling versus they're really angry, you can tell the difference and have a conversation about it.
Yeah.
We did say DAG too many times. He's here.
He's here. I love it. Hey, John.
I thought we only said it once. I don't know how he showed up with us only saying it once.
It was 3 times.
No, you said it once, I put it in chat, and then Mike repeated the chat verbally. That's 3 times. John's here.
Yeah.
Hello.
Plus,
I've
I
been
said at a
summoned.
station. I don't know.
So, John, I'm handing off to Jory, and so this conversation has basically been like a large, a running historical commentary of OCI and how we got here, as well as some opportunities for improvement in the future. I think one of the things that I heard was like, maybe working towards like design principles to be able to better outline like where people could be going next, and then also maybe using that to be able to invite in more maintainers, because it happens periodically that like we just don't end up with more people and people end up getting busy and falling into the sea, kind of like VBATs. So Brandon, I'm
Even
gonna pass
fall into
back
the
to you.
sea.
Yeah.
But I was going to say, John, this is your opportunity to say, like, here's some fundamental changes I'd love to see in this, and we need to be going these new famous directions.
I won't. I won't waste our time.
Oh. I think the biggest thing, John, was do we want to go to breaking changes in a 2.0? Is that something we want to even contemplate? And all that that implies, right? A new mission statement and do a whole lot of different things, and then a migration plan, right? To get everybody to move up, all that kind of stuff. Is that something we want to do, or are we going to keep OCI in a, small extensions, experimentation kind of path that we started with VBATS's, list of extension points that we could add, kind of thing, or potential new artifact types, like, or a new manifest for 1.2, that sort of thing. Do we want to create a new strategy for OCI and get the new maintainers to bring, to come in and do all that work? Baits in the water. Take it.
I have opinions, but they're just mine. I'm sure someone's already said this, that historically OCI has been a backward-looking thing and not a forward-looking thing. I like that model because it means I'm not responsible for mistakes if we are just documenting other people's mistakes. Yeah, I think it makes sense to have a 2.0. I don't know that it makes sense for us as a group to originate the breaking changes, but yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff we should fix, basically. And if we find the activation energy among all of the contributors on the internet to agree, it's like, yes, let's fix that, then yeah, I think it makes sense as a 2.0. But I don't want to wag the dog by coming up with the 2.0 spec and then telling people they should implement it, certainly.
Okay.
So 3.0.
1.2, I think is what. Yeah. I think it's also possible, John, that if there were new extensions that OCI would be interested in that were requiring of a new API, that would be a little bit different than a 2.0 that rewrites the 1.1. That might be easier to swallow.
The big ones on the table right now are extending tag listing, but also making that work historical for the tags, not just what the tag currently points to, but historically all the stuff that it points to. And then the big one is going to be some kind of search interface to say, tell me everything that meets this criteria.
I'd be okay with adding namespace to a 1.2 so that you could have a search API.
Yeah.
But
I
don't
don't
we
think
have
any of that is
namespace with
breaking.
extensions? Is that the point, that we use extensions to
I
solve
think
that?
we should. I think we should, so we can experiment personally, and let people extend that way.
I was thinking of doing a quick draft PR of just a minimum viable tag listing API. Don't throw the whole everything in there, but just to do a minimal revamp of that to say, hey, what if we did a version 2 of this that had a different accept header and it output all the tags with descriptors and also untagged things in a JSON format.
As an extension? Or
Just
you want to
directly in the tag listing with the new accept header.
Yeah, okay.
And,
Yeah.
and keep it, the idea of being the minimum viable is that it's simple enough that maybe it wouldn't be difficult to implement, but it's also, since it's in JSON format there, it's something that registries could extend over time, add more fields, add more content in there.
Right.
So it's,
But
I've been
pros and
batting it
cons.
around.
Pros and
that-
cons of continuing to extend the existing API with additional headers. Yeah.
I've been batting around the past few meetings. I'll at some point throw up a draft PR.
Eventually, the clients are going to get tired of trying something, and if it fails, knowing the version that it's working with of the registry. Eventually.
Well, with an accept header, the client can say, I accept version 2 or I don't. And then the registry knows what to return as the content type of the response. And so there's no back and forth. It's just, I know how to work with this.
That
send me
sort of
whatever you want.
requires one feature at a time goes into each version so that you can split. Eventually, clients will be a little confused because I have 3 different versions or 4 different versions of the same thing.
It would all be the content type of the response.
Yeah.
And so
it's
it's up to the client to parse that content type.
Yeah. That's cool. As opposed to an explicit, what version am I working? And do you have this feature? Give me a, yeah. In the runtime engine.
Bidirectional.
Yeah.
It's bidirectional because the client in the request says, hey, I accept all these different kinds of responses. Give me whatever one you can. Same way right now, they'll say, I accept this different manifest type. So they tell the registry, and the registry just says, okay, here's the one I know how to give you, or here's the one I prefer to give you.
Right. Yeah.
All that list.
Relying on standard HTTP protocols. Okay.
Yep. All right. 2 minutes
Poor
left.
John. Poor John.
Any good parting thoughts?
John's looking down. Oh man, I'm out of this.
I feel like John should want this though. We're talking a new API. We can make it compatible with all that good stuff you're doing, all the GAR stuff.
John's like, I got a different plan. Leave me alone.
Everything I think about is about gzip at this point in my life.
That's not a bad way to go, and we can keep our tag as we're doing that.
If we're going to do gzip, I'd really like to see the Go gzip implementation expose some of the stuff so that I don't have to do cgo.
You might enjoy my newest Go library that I wrote. I'll send it to you.
Does it implement streaming? These images are getting too damn big.
Yeah, basically. Yeah.
All right.
It is essentially like Sochi, but broken down into nicer components than cgo monolithic stuff.
Cool.
Yeah, I don't have
What
any
should you do on
opinions.
maternity leave? Paternity leave, sorry. You just go out and write a new library for gzip.
I have opinions.
Nice. TarGZ. I love it.
I
There's
was
a
about to
lot
say,
of
have another
to-dos in
kid write a
there.
new library for me.
One day. It's going to take a few years.
All right. On that awkward note there. Joy, welcome to the group here. This
Yeah.
is, like Amy said, we start with 0 agenda. We'll go for the full hour and then some. And yeah,
It's
until next
magical.
week.
Well,
Maybe if
I
people have stuff you want to chat about, put it on the agenda and then we'll have stuff to talk about in the beginning of the meeting next week. But otherwise, this is the normal way we do it.
Built-in snap sweaters. We could use some Linux help and some other operating systems.
I'll just say it's really lovely to meet you guys. I can tell this is going to be a fun group, which has got me very excited. So I'm looking forward to stepping in, transitioning over from Amy, hopefully providing value to you guys. I'll drop my email address and also our operations alias. So it'll be kind of more of a team sport. I have a team of about 7 program and project coordinators. So at some point, you know, it may be usually me, but probably also one of my teammates who will also be supporting you guys. But looking forward to continuing to learn more about what you're doing and seeing where we can help you.
There. I've dropped
Awesome.
some things over there, but yeah, like really, like I like this for everyone to be able to transition off from being like bugging me and Chris directly is in fact not going to scale, and Jory will in fact help us scale by being able to have like an actual standards team. Yes, yes.
It's so much fun to ping you though, Amy.
I know, and like, you
Miss
know,
that.
again, I'm around to like the end of May, so like all of this is going to be peaceful and quiet, and everybody's going to like know exactly where things are running. So good times.
And then on June 1st, it's going to blow up.
Boom.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, good luck finding me. Yeah.
That would be interesting to turn this into more of a traditional standards group. I've been involved in those, and it's a lot of extra work.
Right.
It's a
So
lot
you
more
know.
formal. It's a lot more formal than this group.
Yeah. No, y'all are, I can tell, going to be actually a delight, a highlight of my day. So thank you for that.
All right.
It's not going to
Till
get better
next
from here,
week.
Brandon. We're good.
Gonna say till next week, and thanks for joining.
See you online. Bye all.
I go.